Then I took a smidge and applied it down there.
This One's Wife. Corrupt Charity versus Duke and Duchess of Grift. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. There is an interesting battle that has been shaping up between Dr. Sophie Chandala and the trustees of Sentebale, and more widely in respect of Harry and this one's wife. So far, there has been the mass resignation of the Board of Trustees of Sentebale, suggesting that they are stepping down for the moment, essentially in protest at the behaviour of Dr. Sophie Chandala. She has struck back by making serious allegations with regard to misconduct on the parts of those running the charity. Allegation and counter-allegation has ensued. Naturally, for those who are critics of this one's wife and Harry, the allegations of Dr. Sophie Chandala are ones which they will revel in. After all, they've long held the belief that these two are grifters, and it would appear that they're getting caught out. On the other hand, there are those that have a degree of sympathy for Harry, that a charity that he once established appears to have gone up in flames as a consequence of the behaviour of two women, the chair of the Board of Trustees and also the conduct of his wife, that hapless Harry finds himself in a situation whereby something that he pledged his name to in relation to his mother has fallen apart and is in disarray. Interestingly, comment sections on the articles about the Sentebale scandal have a mixed response, with many regarding Dr. Sophie Chandala as not somebody who is actually approaching this from a position of moral authority. What have we got? Well, in relation to Dr. Chandala, it's clear that she's a capable woman. She's a lawyer that was trained in London and built her career there. She has held notable positions, for instance, at Meta and Morgan Stanley. She's held various positions within charities also. And it's evident that she has got some ability and that she is an intelligent woman. But what is interesting is that the allegations that she has put forward have only just been made recently, even though she's been involved with Sentebale for some time, which does raise the legitimate question of why are you only talking about it now? The charity is something questionable. For instance, it has 500 employees, but isn't that large a charity? And therefore you wonder, is it the case that people have been making good on the funds that have come their way? A lot of those monies being generated by Harry to create positions for people in Africa without necessarily delivering the stated aims of the charity. It's been hit by the loss of US aid, where accounts have demonstrated that money has been funneled to Sentebale from US aid in the past. And we all know about Trump and Musk cutting back upon US aid's application around the world. Chandala has faced heavy criticism as a consequence of the allegation that she spent some £500,000 on consultants. This is a substantial amount of money when you consider that around the time the income of the charity was just £3 million, and therefore 1/6 of its funds has been utilised in relation to consultants which didn't really prove value for money. It's also been the case that Chandala's conduct has been called into question by a number of individuals. For instance, Calello Laratoli, one of the trustees, didn't recognise the allegations that Chandala made about experiencing disrespect, bullying, intimidation, nor misogyny and misogynoir. Baroness Linda Chalker of Wallasey, who served as a trustee for nearly 2 decades until November last year, explained that Chandala's almost dictatorial style had led to clashes. The board of trustees has acted as one, all resigning in protest. Are they all in on it, or is this the reaction of individuals to a dictatorial and difficult individual? When they sought to oust Dr. Chandauka, she suddenly starts making these allegations of experiencing abuse and bullying and misogyny and misogynoir. But she hadn't raised these allegations previously. This has caused some to think that the problem is actually Dr. Chandauka, a self-serving individual who now is bandying these allegations around as a consequence of people trying to curb her power. On the other hand, of course, we know that Harry and this one's wife are indeed the Duke and Duchess of Grift. Chandauka has described their brand as toxic, which is something that many people can see as a consequence of the behaviour of Harry and his wife. It's no surprise that Chandauka would describe their brand as such, and would therefore not necessarily be self-serving. Might it be that Chandauka has started to uncover some truths in relation to the use of the funds? After all, it's stated that Audi pulled their sponsorship when this one's wife demanded $1 million donation, even though she's got nothing to do with the charity. Back in 2008, only £84,000 of £1 million raised was actually applied to helping AIDS victims. And could it be that this charity is instead being utilised to line people's pockets with regard to expenses and a rather cushy lifestyle? Around that time, £250,000 was being spent on staffing costs, £1,000 more on new offices and a fleet of 4x4s. There was a director who was being paid £100,000 a year back in 2008 and had a 4-bedroom villa with staff and an allowance for overseas education for the director's children, all thrown in, paid by the charity. Could it be that Dr. Chandauka, in wanting to reform the structure of the charity, has been ruffling some feathers because there's been a cosy arrangement hitherto, and therefore she's viewed as a threat? Well, we haven't actually seen any evidence so far. Simply the suggestion that Dr. Chandauka is a difficult individual who has sought to cause problems and therefore they've sought to have her ousted, and Dr. Chandauka stating, "I'm speaking the truth, I'm standing my ground. Harry tried to force a failure of the charity he founded and then would swoop in to be the rescuer. And they've sought to oust me just because I've started to ask some difficult questions of some of the things that have gone on before." The Charity Commission is investigating, and therefore we will find out whether it is a charity that has been riddled with corruption and Chandauka has sought to remedy that, or whether she is a difficult individual and that she's sought to run things her own way, which has caused her to clash with the trustees. Their investigation may provide us with that, and it might also be the case that court proceedings, since Chandauka sought an injunction to prevent her from being ousted, presumably those proceedings will ultimately go to trial to make a determination as to whether the injunction should have been granted or not. That's the ordinary case with injunctions. You seek them as an emergency measure, and if the balance of probability supports the granting of an injunction rather than the provision of damages, you get your injunction. But then it has to go to trial to determine, on a full examination of the facts and evidence, whether it ought to have been granted in the first place. This is why the party that seeks the injunction has to provide a cross-undertaking as to damages, because if the other party is proven to be right and that they've suffered a loss as a consequence of the granting of the injunction, then they're able to call in that cross-undertaking as to damages. Therefore, it would appear that there could well be a legal case which will examine the evidence, and we will find out who is right or wrong in due course. It's clear that people are divided. There are some that take the side of Chandauka, primarily because they don't like Harry and this one's wife. There are others that take her side because what she's accused Harry and this one's wife of doing chimes with their earlier behaviours. There are others that think that Chandauka is just as bad as this one's wife, and that she is a self-serving individual. You only have to look at the comments section with regard to some of the articles, for instance, at the Times and also the Telegraph, whereby people are not exactly convinced as to the bona fides of the behaviour of Dr. Chandauka. But ultimately, whether Dr. Chandauka is self-serving or whether she's actually wielding a sword of truth here is irrelevant, because what she's suggesting, whatever her motivation might be, is hugely problematic for Harry and this one's wife. It's either the case that Dr. Chandauka is armed with the truth of unsavoury behaviours, a toxic brand on their part, or you've got another grifter who's out-grifted the grifters. Might it be that she is manipulative and self-serving, and that ultimately still causes a problem for Harry and this one's wife? Time will tell us, but now it doesn't matter, because at the moment, Harry's charity is mired in scandal. Harry's charity has been accused of being affected by the toxicity of the brand of him and his wife. He has been accused of being a bully. At this juncture, this is being reported on with many people believing the allegations, and it's covered across mainstream media. And therefore, this is a huge PR problem for Harry and this one's wife. A charity that he was tied to finds itself with all of this infighting. Allegations are being put forward by an articulate lawyer who seems very firm in what she's saying, and ordinarily, lawyers are fairly risk-averse with regard to the things that they would say and do. And either you've got somebody whose own relationship with reality is rather adrift, or there's someone who very carefully has the receipts, the evidence, and therefore is fully confident in what she's saying. We will find out. But it ultimately doesn't matter, because at this moment in time, whether you're dealing with a charity that's corrupt, the fact is that the Duke and Duchess of Grift are being exposed again, that they have their hitherto behaviours being scrutinised, and people suggesting it's highly likely that they've been utilising this as a private vehicle. Look at what's been going on with Archwell. Where's the investigation into Invictus? Funds need to be checked and audited. All of the organisations that the Sussexes are involved in has the sniff of some kind of financial scam about them. And with many people having been calling for such investigations for some time, with certain individuals joining the dots to suggest that there is something shady, that there is money laundering perhaps going on, the exposure by Dr. Chandala, whether it's for her own purposes or a more morally appropriate one, is ultimately irrelevant. It might be that the Duke and Duchess of Grift are being out-grifted by another grifter, or that they're finding themselves foundering as somebody wields the sword of truth. Either way, it's a huge problem for this one's wife and Harry. The exposure and the nature of the allegations, particularly in light of previous behaviours, causes many people to believe you're finally getting your comeuppance. Karma is delivering. I'm not a believer in karma. I'm a believer in the evidence. But at this point in time, the willingness of Dr. Sophie Chandala to speak in such forthright terms about the behaviour of the trustees, the charity, and Harry in particular, causes a substantial problem. And that, naturally, amounts to a huge threat to this one's wife's control, because Harry is an extension of her, and therefore it might be that she needs to look to jettison him, to distance herself from this scandal. That her recent attempts, of course, to prove to everybody that she's such a lovely person and kind with more of her scam jam nonsense, are foundering in the light of these recent revelations. The fact that she's attempting to cause people to look the other way isn't working. It does make me laugh when it's spoken about that she's seeking to cause a distraction, but it never succeeds because people hone in on these problems that the Sussexes engage in. Whatever might be motivating Dr. Chandala, the fact is, what she's alleged, the previous behaviours, and what's being reported on amounts to a huge problem for the Sussexes. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.